In 2004, in the sunny city of Miami, a family's seemingly perfect life was shattered when a son's troubled past came back to haunt his parents in the most devastating way. This is the story of the Sutton family murder. Life was picture perfect for John and Susan Sutton. The couple adopted their first child, Christopher Sutton, in the late 1970s and welcomed their second child, Melissa, 7 years later. The tight-knit family of 4 lived in a luxurious home in Coral Gables, Florida. This upscale neighborhood near Miami is full of life and dreams. John was an attorney of high reputation. He was known for his mastery of the law and success in most high-profile cases he managed. He was licensed to practice law in the state since 1972. John's personality was unmatched. As for Susan Sutton, she was his loving wife and manager.
Susan was a head nurse of surgical intensive care. We did a lot of traveling together through the Caribbean. I had a couple of different boats and would take them to the Bahamas and scuba dive and fish.
She was his backbone in the office and the home. The Sutton family shared a love for education and community living. Both parents implemented discipline in their kids from an early age. Like every seemingly perfect family, there were challenges. Melissa was calm and obedient. She loved her home and did everything to protect it. She was everything a parent wanted. However, her brother was different. Christopher was a black sheep of the Sutton family, a role he seemed to have repented of. His parents believed he had left his troubled past behind. Unknown to them, he plotted evil. Beyond his newfound character were darker intentions. These intentions would later shatter the Sutton family. On August 22, 2004, John and Susan hosted a party in their home on Orduna Drive, off Granada Boulevard. This area was once known as the Devil's Den. Susan had just turned 57, and John's firm, Sutton Law Group, won 3 lucrative cases. The couple's son, Christopher, his fiancée, Juliet Driscoll, and John's law partner, Teddy Montoto, dropped by for the gathering. After the party, Christopher and Juliet left for the cinema while Teddy headed home. Tired from the evening's event, John and Susan retired to their separate bedrooms. Although married, the couple didn't share the same bedroom. John was notorious for his loud snores, and Susan couldn't handle them. She endured it for years before drawing the line. After saying their goodbyes, they went to bed. But then, this night would change their lives forever. In a dramatic twist, a gunman sneaked into their house at about 10:30 p.m. This stranger parked his car down the tree-lined streets of Coral Gables as he walked into the house. He was dressed in black to suit the event. The dog barely barked as he walked in through the back sliding door. He knew the door was never locked, so it was easy. This intruder had a 9mm Glock pistol. He was on a mission to kill John and Susan Sutton. Upon getting to Susan's room, shots rang out. He fired 6 shots at Susan, who was on the phone in the master bedroom. Before John realized it, the assailant barged into his room, shooting him in the torso and face. Despite his head injuries, John managed to call 911. He groaned in pain as he requested for an ambulance.
Coral Gables 911.
I need police. My house. I've just been assaulted.
What happened, sir?
Somebody came in and shot me.
They shot you?
Yes.
Who did it?
I don't know. I can't see. I need police and I need an ambulance.
Okay. Where did he shoot you?
In my head.
Are you bleeding? Do you see any blood?
I'm bleeding all over, yes.
Okay.
Meanwhile, the Sutton attacker vanished into the night. Moments later, police swarmed the neighborhood from every direction. Medics drove the almost dying lawyer to a local trauma care center while confirming Susan's death. By this time, John was in a pool of his own blood. He lost so much blood that medics thought he would die. As police tried to wrap their heads around the incident, they noticed something was off. First, Susan's jewelry and John's wallet with cash were untouched. The person who did it was on a mission. He didn't want to mess with it. Again, one of the guests that night miraculously arrived at the scene. Teddy arrived right in time of the crime. He told the police that he was on the phone with Susan when he heard shots, so he raced to her house. Why was he on the phone with her at that time? Did Teddy want the couple dead? These questions prompted the police to name him the first suspect. Interrogations began the day after the shooting. Besides working at John's law firm, Teddy was a marksman. He was a competitive shooter and had been shooting earlier that day. This revelation raised eyebrows. In a bid to piece things together, Detective Cordero sent Teddy's gun for testing. While this was ongoing, she had a list of questions for the suspect. She felt he was hiding something about a secret relationship with Susan. Why else was he on the phone with her that night? After failing a polygraph test, Teddy confessed to having an affair with Susan. However, he had no motive to hurt her or her husband. Teddy's gun didn't match the murder weapon, and police cleared him of the crime. Detectives confirmed he wasn't in the Suttons' home during the shooting. Who would want the Suttons dead? As a successful lawyer, John had a fair share of enemies. He occasionally received death threats, most of which he dismissed. Police checked the records, scrutinizing every name, but they all had alibis. However, there was one more person they needed to check. A woman had stormed John's firm days before the attack. She was angry over a settlement issue and threatened to wreak havoc.
A lawyer who presumably had enemies.
Early on, there was a lady, and she had threatened to shoot up my office.
Now, that would be a classic example of a motive to commit murder.
The woman had a boat that may have helped her escape through the waterway that night. But when police dug deeper, they found no link between the woman and the shooting. Surveillance cameras showed the boat never left the marina where it was docked. If not her, then who? The police were back to square one. As they examined little details, they stumbled on Christopher's records. On the surface, he was a grieving son devastated by the tragedy. But as detectives dug deeper, they uncovered details of his past life. Layer by layer, his past began to unfold. Christopher got into lots of trouble as a teenager. He struggled with conduct-defiant disorder, a condition that led to frequent defiance and a lack of impulse control, making him difficult to parent. He was in and out of multiple schools. His parents wanted the best for him, but this teenager never understood. Upon dropping him off at a new school, he would sneak out through the back door into the street. He skipped classes and was not interested in learning. While in high school, he and some other kids broke into a teacher's house and spray painted it. He was later arrested and sued. Christopher was mean. He wanted to draw tattoos, do body piercings, and abuse drugs, even though his parents hated that. He got extremely angry and destroyed things if he didn't get his way. At 16, he already had a rifle. Years ago, he pointed it at Susan and Melissa. He threatened to shoot, but changed his mind. They would later discover that the rifle was unloaded. Even so, he was a bitter pill to swallow. Christopher developed so much hate for his parents that he planned to kill them for the inheritance. One day, Susan was cleaning his room and found a note. On that note, he expressed his desire to kill his parents. When she confronted him about it, he told a joke. Susan didn't take it lightly. She was scared for herself, her husband, and her daughter. She knew she had to act fast. They thought of getting a restraining order against him, but this was not enough. They wanted him out of the house by all means. What better way to get rid of a headstrong teenager than to send him to Paradise Cove, a disciplined boarding school in Samoa? Christopher was shipped to this strange city for a behavior modification program for troubled boys. His parents believed this was the answer to his problems. Christopher was only 17 when he arrived. Punishments were severe, and every rule counted in Paradise Cove. As someone used to breaking rules, Christopher spent hours in the isolation box. Offenders were sometimes bound with rope and dragged to the mountains, where they were hogtied and left in the open sky. Paradise Cove was a brutal cage that stripped people of their humanity. After 1 year in Paradise Cove, Christopher sent a video message to his parents.
I feel like I've been begging to get me out of your hair. I've been here for a year now, and I feel like I'm in the same spot as some of you guys. But I don't know how I feel like you guys tell me out here when I get level 3. I'm still pushing for level 3, but I don't even know if I want you guys to come out.
The tearful kid expressed disappointment in his parents. He believed they sent him there to get him out of their presence. He explained how toxic the environment was and pleaded to be taken home. He didn't want to be there. John and Susan traveled to Samoa to see things for themselves. Again, Christopher tried to convince them, but they didn't believe him.
Stories of it being torture were, I think, greatly exaggerated. He wanted to come back, I believe, to Miami and play.
It was then that the teenager became determined to leave. He swore to leave the premises on his 18th birthday, but his father got a court order to keep him there for another year. Christopher was angry. He hated his parents for doing that to him. His relationship with his parents became bumpy after he left Paradise Cove. After piecing these details together, investigators thought that Christopher knew something about the fatal shooting. Was this a revenge act against his parents for his time at Paradise Cove? The case was gradually coming to a close. Christopher's interrogation was straightforward. On the night of the shooting, he and Juliet left for the movie theater. He showed detectives the tickets, and surveillance cameras captured him leaving before midnight. But as they watched, something caught Detective Cordero's eye. Christopher was fixated on his cell phone on his way out. Phone records showed that he called the same number 331 times weeks before the shooting. He was constantly on the phone with Garrett Kopp, his childhood friend and smoking partner.
Months after the horrific events of August 22, 2004, police have arrested Garrett Kopp for the murder of Susan Sutton and the attempted murder of John Sutton.
Garrett was arrested less than 24 hours after the shooting for an unrelated event. He assaulted someone with a gun in another part of Miami and was apprehended. Detectives reached out to Garrett's arresting officer requesting the gun used for the assault. The officer obliged, and they took it for testing. Shockingly, it matched the rifle used in the Sutton shooting. Garrett Kopp was immediately invited for questioning. The tense interrogation lasted for 6 hours. Garrett didn't reveal much at first, but with pressure from officers, he spilled the beans.
Did he formulate this plan, or was it a combined effort between two of you?
He did.
What plan did he tell you? What did he want you to do?
Go in the back door, walk in, and shoot him.
He planned to go into the house and shoot the couple. In exchange, he'll get $100,000 from the $500,000 in insurance money. And if he dared tell anyone about it, Christopher threatened to kill Garrett and his son. Garrett narrated how Christopher was desperate to execute his parents. He even got him the gun used in the operation and directed his actions that night. Christopher deliberately left the sliding door on the back patio unlocked and described his parents' room to the assailant. Getting into the family house was easy since Christopher had it all planned. Susan was under her blanket when he fired 6 times. The police arrested Garrett, but their focus remained on Christopher. Determined to find a connection, they turned to someone who knew him well. It was none other than his girlfriend, Juliet. Officers invited her for questioning. Her confidence showed that she had nothing to hide. Juliet said she knew nothing about the crime. Although in a relationship with him, she didn't know about his plan. Over the 13-hour questioning, she maintained her innocence. She loved John and Susan like her parents and wouldn't hurt them. John gave her a job at his law firm and supported her financially, while Susan taught her hands-on skills like makeup and home management. Juliet became teary to convince them, but the officers were unmoved. They threatened her with arrest if she didn't speak the truth. At this point, Juliet knew she had to save herself. She revealed the deep-seated hatred her boyfriend nursed for his parents since they sent him to Samoa. He believed he would have been better if he hadn't gone there. He wanted them to pay for what they did to him. He was willing to retaliate, even if it took a decade. Officers already knew about his life in Samoa, but only wanted confirmation. Meanwhile, John woke up in intensive care with a massive injury that caused him to lose his sight. Melissa said her father was unrecognizable when she first saw him. It was a miracle that he survived. After his discharge from the hospital, John moved in with Christopher. Within those few days, his son tried to take over his bank account. He was shocked when he heard his son masterminded the shooting. Detectives called him early that morning, urging him not to let anybody in the house until they came. It made sense that Christopher wanted to get back at his parents. When officers arrived, they broke the news to him. Despite his health condition, he helped the police with information to solve his wife's murder. When news about Christopher's warrant got out, he was on the run for almost 2 weeks. He was eventually arrested, tried, and sentenced.
As the trial progresses, a clearer picture of who Chris Sutton is begins to emerge. The prosecution team will parade a string of witnesses on the stand to clearly illustrate the defendant's deep-seated anger and resentment. Anger and resentment that led to an obsession with revenge.
The much-awaited trial started on July 7, 2010. As proceedings began, John Sutton sat far from his son. Prosecutor Kathleen Hogue told the jury how Christopher hired a hitman to slay his parents. The plan was to shoot his parents and get paid when the defendant got his insurance money. They went into detail on the true situation of his life. Christopher did nothing but sell drugs when he returned from Samoa. He had no source of livelihood, but depended on his parents to survive. Garrett took the stand to share his side of the story.
Mr. Kopp, did you shoot to kill Susan Sutton?
Yes.
And did you succeed in killing Susan Sutton?
Yes.
With what type of a weapon?
Handgun.
Did you shoot to kill John Sutton?
Yes.
Did you succeed in killing John Sutton?
No.
He recounted all that happened that night, how he walked into the house, shot both parents, and walked out unnoticed. He and Christopher had planned the crime for months. His friend gave him $50 to buy black clothes for the crime at Walmart. Once again, he admitted that Christopher hired him to do the job. Well, Christopher's defense insisted that Garrett was lying. Defense lawyer Bruce Fleischer claimed that the police forced Garrett to testify in exchange for a 30-year plea deal. He said that the hitman was threatened with an electric chair to make a false confession. Christopher told the jury that his friend wanted to escape the death penalty by all means, even if it meant a false confession. Prosecutors still stood their ground on the true situation of things. It was not the first time Christopher tried to execute this plan. They invited Jose Peon, a convicted murderer, to the stand to share his side. Peon met Christopher in 1999. At the time, Christopher was desperate to exact revenge on his parents. He asked Peon if he knew any hitman that would kill his parents. Peon thought he was joking, but Chris reiterated that his parents were worth $500,000 and had life insurance. It was a juicy deal, but Peon backed out. Reacting to this statement, Christopher called Peon a liar. Prosecutors further proved their case by showing the jury a text Christopher sent to his girlfriend, Juliet. It read, "We're going to be better off after they're gone." As if like a dream, Christopher dropped his head and shed tears. He worried that the police were setting him up. He believed Juliet would never say that about him. Sadly, he was wrong because she was next to take the stand. Juliet told the jury about her boyfriend's perception of his mother. He called her a bitch at the slightest provocation and disliked her for not giving him everything he deserved. She recalled how angry he was about his time in Samoa and how the trauma never left him.
Whether they needed to pay for taking those years from his life.
Yes.
Again, Christopher's attorney countered the claims. He believes she was also threatened with the death penalty. Juliet ended by saying she never knew he would try to kill his parents. She believed it was all bluff. By now, John was convinced that his son was behind the shooting. He took the stand to nail him this last time. John described his son's insatiable desire for money. For someone who didn't have a job, he needed so much to fuel his lifestyle. When John was discharged, Christopher wanted to control his finances. He noticed something was fishy and kept certain details away from him. Unknown to him, he was saving himself from his killer son. Although John was convinced about his son's actions, he still couldn't believe it. He told the world at the hearing that he no longer loved his son. He officially distanced himself from Christopher and is now known as Melissa's father. Despite the mountain of evidence pointing to Christopher, he had to prove his innocence to the jury. It was the moment he had been waiting for.
That Juliet Driscoll lied when she said that things would be better when your parents were dead.
Absolute lie.
And when Juliet Driscoll told the police or testified that you wanted your parents dead, that was a lie.
Correct.
And that when Juliet Driscoll...
Christopher called his childhood friend an insatiable drug fiend. He claimed that Garrett broke into his home to steal marijuana. Earlier that day, Garrett asked him for drugs, but he refused. However, his friend knew where he hid those drugs. Garrett knew the house so well because he visited often. Christopher testified that the drugs were hidden in the closet of his old bedroom. It was the same room Susan occupied until the shooting. He claimed that the marijuana was worth $7,000. When Garrett broke into his home that night, he was shocked to see Susan in the room. Worst still, she was awake and recognized him. He was scared and shot her. The same fear prompted him to shoot John before fleeing the scene. Christopher insisted he was innocent and had no reason to kill his parents. In fact, he had healed from the torture in Samoa. In a shocking twist, he told the jury that Paradise Cove wasn't bad after all. He benefited so much from it. When asked about the maltreatment there, he broke down in tears, in contradiction to his earlier claims. His reaction proved that he hadn't healed from his experiences there. In her closing statement, prosecutor Kathleen ended by calling Christopher a greedy, lazy, and entitled man. She urged the jury to look through the details and do the needful. After a day and a half of deliberations, Christopher Patrick Sutton was found guilty of first-degree murder and attempted first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. On the other hand, Garrett pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 30 years in prison. His father, Mitchell Kopp, was disappointed in his son. He'll spend nearly half his life behind bars over a silly decision. After Christopher's sentencing, John returned to his law firm while working on regaining his sight. He considered optic nerve regeneration at Scapin's Eye Research Institute in Massachusetts. He has now implanted a device around the back of his eye. While waiting for a permanent solution, he still practices law. Thanks to an aide, John memorizes his briefs and wins his cases like in the old times. He reportedly has a girlfriend who loves him unconditionally. John has still not forgiven Christopher for what he did to his family. He's now in his 70s and continues to practice law. His life is taking shape with each passing day. What could have been done to make Christopher a better person? Could this tragedy have been avoided? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you like the way we create these videos and you want to help bring more cases like this to light, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives. Thank you once again for watching.